Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Beulah Family Homestead Podcast. Today we have with us my good friend, Alredo, who is actually going to be teaching our butchering class coming up on January 14th. If you haven't signed up, I'm sure after this conversation today, you'll be going right online and sign up. But before we get started, I want you to go onto our website, look for our new merch that's going to be coming out soon. We got some Beulah Family Homestead gear. So go check that out. And once again, after this conversation, go and sign up for this class, January 14th. We'll be butchering some animals. But before we go there, let's get started. Welcome, my good friend, Alredo. Thank you so much for coming.
Good to be here.
Having this conversation with me. Let's get started. Let's talk about, first of all, your experience in butchering. How many years of experience do you have? What qualifications do you have? And your skills?
Trained by my dad, who worked at Oscar Myers. Started when I was actually probably about 5 years old.
Okay.
We butchered at home. We usually butchered 2 steers a year, about 5 head of hogs, 50 chickens, ducks, geese, sheep. All the neighbors in the years to come as I got older, by the time I was a teenager, a lot of neighbors and different always had me come and do their butchering for them.
Nice.
And and still do.
Nice. And what are your favorite parts of butchering? Is it the end product? Is it the
It's just all of it. I was taught by my dad always to like anything and everything, and I do.
There you go.
I enjoy what I do.
All right, nice. Well, we're gonna dive into this. I got some pretty deep questions. But the first thing I want to talk about is I noticed that in this area of butchering and people trying to become more sustainable or more healthy, a lot of people aren't able to afford the price tag that comes with the possibility of purchasing a whole cow or a quarter of a cow or a grass-fed cow.
Right.
And even before we get into that, what is your experience in taste and quality of grass-fed versus corn-fed or grain-fed? How would you explain that to people?
There's a totally different taste to it. There is actually what people would consider a gamey taste to anything that is grass-fed. But to me, it's just good flavor.
Okay.
It's the farmers nowadays that are big farmers that are just pushing their cattle to get them out to market as quick as possible, fast as possible. You lose a lot of flavor in doing that. And so it takes a hair longer to grow something on grass, but your flavor, your taste is there. And you're not pushing all the hormones that they put into them by, using BGH and all these other chemicals to push something so that, literally in 9 months it would be ready to butcher.
Wow.
So
let's talk about that. You mentioned something very important there, hormones. Now, I noticed that in my experience of being all over the country, my basketball career, seeing different levels of poverty, high class, low class, whatever you want to call it, I've noticed that even in certain communities, the meat is a lot different.
yes.
What would you say to that? Like,
it is depending on where it's coming from. Your different types of animal, which most people don't know. There's different flavors to everything. And so, depending on what variety is in your area, as far as breed, determines taste. And then the other thing that determines taste is how they're raised.
Would you say that
and what they're fed?
Would you say that there's a better quality of meat in a more luxurious community versus a poor community?
Can be.
And in my experience, I've seen that
because they're raising higher quality,
or they only have access to Walmart, or they only have access to certain stores.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with Walmart, but
Nothing wrong with Walmart, but okay, Walmart and your big stores, what they get, plain and simple, is old cows.
Old cows. Okay.
Old bulls. All of that meat is, the amount of age that's on it, they've used that animal up as much as possible. So there's,
Okay. So then,
it's what my mom would always consider stew meat.
Stew meat. You have some that you can render down, and yeah. So
and you're not worried about flavor because you're going to use different spices to enhance that.
Yeah. So I noticed one of the things that we don't talk about much, that people don't even really know, is the hormones that goes into cows and how that those hormones are actually transferred over to us.
Right.
So even the process of that cow going from one farm to another, from a feedlot to a slaughterhouse, that builds up different anxieties, different stress.
Right.
And is it scientifically proven that those things are within the meat that can be transferred to us?
Yes. Everything that is fed to that steer, that cow, is going to transfer through. It has to. If it's in their system, you're eating it, it's going to be there.
So this is not.
So if you're putting a growth hormone in a steer, you're getting growth hormones
in your food, in your body.
Yeah.
Right. So you're getting it one way or the other.
My dad always considered, and so did my grandpa, that that's where cancers come from. There's all these different chemicals we're putting in our system, and that's why we're seeing so much of it now.
And this is something that's not labeled in grocery stores.
No, they don't have to label it.
It can be grass-fed, but it can yet have all the hormones that...
Yes, because our government wants cheap food. And to get cheap food, they need those animals to be pushed out of the feedlots as quick as possible so that they can keep their cheap food.
Wow. So what would you recommend for someone, and we'll just stick with middle class to lower class.
Right.
Obviously, if you're in, higher class, you probably can afford to go out and buy a quarter of a cow, it's been grass fed and all that stuff. But even for them, they can learn from some of this as well. But what would you say to the process would be for a family that can't drop $1,200 on a quarter of a cow, or
what you want to hopefully happen is like what you're doing with Beulah Farms, is being able to go in with other people and you buy a calf, it's raised at your place, it gets butchered, and you divide it up, and you know what that calf is being fed. You know how it's being raised. And so you know that you're not getting growth hormones, you're not getting all this other stuff.
Right.
And then it becomes affordable. Plus, you're going to have a hand in hopefully helping take care of it.
Right. And we do offer that, where people are able to come out and participate in the raising of their cow or their calf.
Right.
So when we talk about this, there's a process. If you want to learn butchering, you learn the art of it. But most people, number one, they don't have the land. So what you said, going out to find someone that's a farmer that's willing to sell you a young calf that's been grass-fed, bottle-fed, whatever the case may be. What is that weight around? What would you say a good weight of a calf would be to feed two small families? I mean, we're talking about taking
two small families. If you're going to go buy a calf, and then you're going to need probably 500 pounds. 500 pounds
minimum. And I would say 500 pounds is, you're looking at a 1,200 pound cow then at some point. Before
steer, yes.
Steer. So that's pretty good cow.
Right. But if you wanted to, take a couple families through the year, that's what you're going to need.
Okay.
But to buy it to start out with, is very minimal in price compared to what it is to buy if you were just going out to buy it when it was totally raised and ready to butcher.
Right. So what if you had a small calf that was ranging around, let's say it was 500 pounds or 600 pounds? You're looking at 60% of that is throwaway products, guts, bones, all of that. And
and remember, bones you still want to.
You can still have purpose for them. Yeah.
Well, right, because when you're cutting up stuff, bone stays in it. That's part of the flavor.
Right. Right.
And you're seeing too through the course of time, bone marrow is used in different cooking processes. Right. I mean, there's all kinds of things. You know, when you make stews, Grandma always you needed bone in there. That's what helped give the flavor of the stew.
So I would say, in my experience, a quarter of a cow. In
reality, you're probably
75 pounds.
Well, you're going to waste probably 40%.
40%, right?
So you're going to end up with 60 with what bones and everything you still use.
Okay. So a young calf that would finish around a quarter of a cow.
Right.
You had a young calf, and the reason I'm going this route.
Right. Say you're finishing it at 500 pounds.
Right.
Then you're going to end up with 300 pounds.
Right. And the reason I'm going in this conversation is because when you're talking about middle class or lower class people, if they have a garage and they wanted to do this in the winter months, to go and grab a calf at that stage, be able to hang it without any equipment or anything like that.
Yes.
It's very beneficial for their family to work with something that's a lot smaller and still get the quantity of a quarter of a cow.
Right.
I would say. So then what's your experience in veal versus beef? Because a young calf would be considered veal. And
veal, and the reason they're veal is they're bottle fed most of their life. Right. So your meat ends up, it's sort of white and pasty versus red meat.
Right. Yeah.
So you better know what you like.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I think in this process, even getting people to understand it could be a little more tender. It does have a lot more tender. Some more vitamin benefits as a younger calf than an older.
Right.
But everything else, with an exception of fat content, is pretty much the same.
Right.
And I just want to kind of hone in on this cost effectiveness versus going this route for somebody that doesn't have a farm.
Right.
Could you speak to that process? What that process would look like for somebody to go? Maybe it's a family of 4, husband, wife, 2 kids, to go and buy a small calf that weighs 500 pounds. What that finishing thing will look like? What kind of cuts they may get, and how it'll benefit their family.
They're gonna, if you're able to find that, go to your farm, say, and they're able to get that from you, and then your different cuts of meat that they're going to get will be virtually anything and everything you get from a large animal, just not as large a size. You're going to get hamburger out of it. You're going to get steaks out of it, fillets, porterhouse, all of that. You're going to get stew meat even. So the benefits for their family is you're getting something good, fresh, has been raised right, not raised with chemicals, stuff to push it. It's more healthy for the family, for your kids, all of that stuff. And so,
it's easier to work with than a large.
A lot easier to work with because weight-wise, you're not lugging around all of that. So
you don't have to have a tractor or something to hold it up.
Right. You don't have to have a chain hoist and all this other stuff to be able to do it.
So what would they be spending in terms of materials to make something like that happen? I mean, obviously they're already strapped for cash. They bought this cow. What would you say would be the main pieces of equipment that they would need, and how much do you think that would cost?
They could probably get into it for somewhere around, you're going to buy used equipment. And so you could probably get into it for $150 for everything you need. Yeah, good knife, good saw, your wrapping paper, all of that stuff to get it to where it needs to go into the freezer. And then, everybody has freezers and refrigerators.
Right.
And so with you doing a smaller quantity, you wouldn't need to go out and buy a big, huge chest type freezer because you're getting a whole animal.
So when we're talking about this cost effectiveness and the dollar amount, I would say with the buying of a cow, you're somewhere around maybe $300,
right?
And maybe even less than that. Sometimes
less than that, depending on what
want to get rid of them.
Right, the market price is.
Right.
So that'll depend how cheap you get it per se. So
and how it's raised too.
Right.
You know.
Oh yeah.
So we're looking at maybe $300.
Right.
And then you're another $150 with materials. You're up to $450.
Right.
Is there a way that?
And when you look at when a family sits down and looks at what their budget is for the year for meat, what do you spend at Walmart or wherever you go? Think about that, and then you'll realize what you may save by doing it yourself.
Right. Which is a lot.
Right.
If you really, and most people don't have the capability of going and adding up all the meat that they spend, but if they just do an average.
Right, just think about it. What do you spend a month?
Yeah.
You're gonna know. Times it by 12.
Yeah.
You got what you spent a year.
Yeah.
And and that's chicken, that's beef, that's pork, that's tuna, that's everything,
Which is really easy. Those
are
really easy to raise. So we're up to about $450. And now, is there a way that they could possibly get some of that money back by donating money or donating meat to maybe a family member or a close friend, where now that cuts that amount down even, because some families eat a lot more beef than others. So what would that look like?
You, depending on what you use a year, if you were able to cut it in half, you just cut all your costs in half too, because you're recovering that then.
Right.
And it's like my son, my oldest boy, he buys a beef a year. Well, he's got friends that every year he knows he doesn't use all of that meat.
Right.
And so they end up getting part of it.
Yeah.
And so it cuts his costs, saves him money. And
Nice. So I know you're a very religious man, a man of God, as I am myself.
Right.
And I think this process is very biblical.
Right.
What is your take on that?
Something God just gave me this week was Timothy chapter 4.
Okay.
When you read that, it tells you that God created all animals, and all animals that's the New Testament, New Covenant with His people.
Right.
That all meat is good when it's taken with thanksgiving and you understanding where it came from and giving Him thanks for what He's provided.
Mm-hmm. So understanding where it comes from, and when we talk about our bodies being the temple of the Holy Ghost, understanding what goes in it, if you're partaking in the hormones that are put in that animal, that can be very, and I understand
you're destroying the temple,
right? And I understand we can't all get away from it, right?
Right. You're not all going to get away from it,
anybody,
right? But you got to do what works for you, but realize what God is doing for you.
Amen. So, would you consider veal to be red meat?
Yes. It's still got
right.
When you slaughter it and kill it, it still drains red blood.
There you go. So let's talk about like cultural parts of this. You have your African American community, your white American community. You have your Hispanic community. They all partake in beef in different ways. And what I've noticed is that our 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 African Americans and our white Americans are probably the most wasteful when it comes to beef parts. So you want to speak to those parts that people normally throw away and what they could be actually used for. I mean, our Hispanic families, I mean, they get into menudo, they get into tongue tacos, they get into, I think it's tripe, and they get into a lot where there's no waste, you know.
Right. The one thing that I wouldn't, me myself, ever, and people may look at it as waste, but blood. Blood is the one thing.
Yeah, I don't do blood sausage.
Nope, none of that. And I've always looked at liver as, I look at liver as being the oil filter of that system.
Okay.
Would you eat an oil filter?
No.
I don't care.
You probably just offended a lot of people out there. I mean, some people love it.
Yeah, my wife loves liver sausage.
Yeah.
And more power to you. If you like it, great, fine. Me, I look at it as the oil filter of that cow's system, of that steer's system. I'm not going to eat it because I don't like that. But yes, there's a lot of waste throughout, history. That's America. Yeah. America's the most wasteful that there is. And yes, we like the finer cuts.
Right.
And so we don't, there's so much waste, but yes, and that's where each of us has to do what we can to minimize that and cut down on that so that we're not wasting, that we are good stewards of what's been given to us and that we're using it, plain and simple. If you don't like it, give it away to somebody else.
Yeah.
Find another family that is in need.
Well, let me back up a second. So when we talked about donating, selling, even to the point of trading services for something. So
sure.
One thing that I get into to cut down on waste is I'll create dog food out of the bones that maybe I cut up. Dog food. Out of maybe some of the fat that's there, dog food, you can mix it into dog food. So I package little packages of dog food that some people prefer to feed their dog, those type of things. When you get into parts that we don't eat, like the liver or the tongue, where you get into saving money is, well, if you have a dog, well, now you're not buying dog food.
Dog or cat. Yeah.
Dog or cat. I mean, my cat, they eat all that kind of stuff. If you have chickens, chickens are...
Yeah, there's
dinosaurs. So I think there's many ways if we get creative to not be wasteful. One of the things I do is I trade my dog food with the young man for services for my truck. So whenever my truck needs some work done, I can provide dog food. Now, obviously, I'm doing many other animals, chicken, turkey, so there's a lot there. But
we live in a very large world. So in reality, yes, there are so many areas that you can hit and so many different people, that may be in the same area even. And so, yes, I mean, you can make everything go round and work well.
For me and my family, I do, as the head of my household, I take a lot of pride in what goes into the temple of myself, my children.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of communities have been stripped of a lot of, I would call it old ways of doing things. We see family members live a lot longer in previous years. And now what we're seeing is we see a lot of kids that are almost like they got superpowers. I mean, they grow faster, they jump higher, which...
all the growth hormones.
I would speak to that as growth hormones, and a lot of people benefit from that. But and a lot of it is what we have, what we're capable of being able to buy, right? So I'm really passionate about taking this and providing this for people that can't. you know, go and or don't have the funds to go and
Right.
do that for themselves.
And you may look at it that it benefits these people, these, higher ups, but in reality, it hinders them too because, they're dying at a younger age. Look at it, the amount of heart attacks lately of young people everywhere just dropping over. What's the real cause from that?
Yeah.
What we're putting in our systems. My dad was a firm believer. Mom was not allowed to buy canned goods from the store because of all the chemicals that were in it.
Wow.
My dad, up until the day he died, Mom canned 1,600 quarts of different things. We had a root cellar, and all of her vegetables, everything were either frozen or canned, and that's what they lived on. They didn't go to the grocery store and get this or that because Mom canned it. Us kids went out and picked different fruits, different berries, and she would make all of her jams homemade.
Yeah.
So you didn't have all the chemicals coming in there. My dad didn't ever have cancer. I don't believe my mom did because they weren't putting all these chemicals into their system,
So for a family that really wants to take control of what they put in their body, but yet is still experiencing financial difficulties, there's a lot of government assistance out there. Are there creative ways that families can still eat at a high clip, the things they enjoy, but yet be healthy? What are some of the processes they can? I mean, obviously they can go find farms that maybe accept things like food stamps or EBT, or I think they have something out called.
Well, not even that as much as, okay, go out and find in your different communities, and every community has them, your green spots. If you do know farmers that you can have a garden, go do that. Because if you are growing your own food, your fruits, your vegetables, because there are so many green areas around now, because that has caught on, you can grow all your own food. So it isn't being full of chemicals and all this stuff that they spray, the herbicides, the pesticides, all of that stuff that is being done nowadays. You can actually, and look what that could cut your food bill, right in half. If you have your own garden that you can go to grab stuff. And, you can have, every house can have in the windows little pots for growing your herbs, for all your stuff for cooking. Look what that would save you if you don't have to go out and buy that. Because at the end of every season too, what you do with all of that is, you grind up, dry it, grind it all up. You have your own herbs to take you through the winter.
Right.
And so you're saving all that. Yeah. It takes a little bit of work, but the work is well worth it.
Yeah, I agree.
Of what you end up with.
And I think that's the common thing. People don't have enough time to do those things, but I think it's all about.
But what are you spending your time on?
I think, and I think it's being intentional, right? Like, what are you spending your time on? What are you doing? And it takes time to catch on, And I think we live in a day and age where people are starting to become more green, right? They're looking at the things that go in their body, but then yet still, some people have financial limitations or mental limitations to the point where what you don't know. My great uncle always says, "What you don't know, you don't know."
Right.
So if there's something you don't know, then you don't know it. So
right.
Understanding how to even look for those green areas.
Sure.
Getting yourself outside the box. What is transportation? Getting a couple people. I think we need to go back
asking
to
friends.
Some of these ways of community, which is a biblical principle of finding a few people in your neighborhood to say, hey, you grow this, I'll grow this, and you grow this, and we trade and we figure out a way because we're finding more health issues in our young children, especially in the black and brown community, because of the lack of quality food.
Well, and we as a society, that's what we need to work on and get away from, is we have become as a society way too inclusive to each family, and we need to be inclusive and have lots of friends, lots of people working together, doing things. Yes, because that's just a good thing. You know, the old adage was a friend in need is a friend indeed.
There you go.
And so, you know, how can I help you? How can I do whatever? And it may be anything and everything, you know, getting seeds, taking you to go garden somewhere in a green spot, looking, literally for anything and everything, you know.
Yeah. And so to get back into beef as well, are there any pros and cons to a family trying to go this route? Maybe not even understanding the process of aging, and you don't have to age anything, but
No.
why don't you speak to them just on that point alone, the aging process and what that would look like in the garage, or what time of year they should be doing that?
They should be doing it when it's cold, because aging, curing the meat, gives it the flavor, the everything that it needs. It allows, you know, when you first drain the blood, everything to get out of it, because you don't want the blood in it.
Right.
That causes problems. So, you know, all of that is very, very must. And you want to do that, you know, January, February, right in there. Coldest months where your garage could be kept cold and, you know, below freezing, because anything above that stuff is going to spoil, and that's what you don't want. And so you need to be able to do that. And so,
could you walk us through the process? And some people don't like seeing blood. Some people don't like seeing certain things, and they just prefer to buy something from the store.
Well, and that's where we as a society could be helping. You know, if someone can't handle seeing an animal butchered, you know, killed, skinned, all of that stuff, then that's where we can help, because they could be doing other things. They could be helping feed that animal, doing all these other things. So yes, the process is, you know, the process starts from birth.
There you go.
Yeah. And so as that animal is raised to whatever level you want it, to when you then butcher, there's a lot of work that has to be taken care of. You know, and it starts with, you know, okay, some people could be helping bale hay. They could be, you know, doing whatever, depending on what that animal is being fed. There's a lot of work that isn't just about the butchering.
Right.
It's about raising all the way to the end until you eat. You know, even, you know, we could be getting together and a family, you know, there's some women that are really, and men that are really good cooks.
Yeah.
And, you know, we could be getting together and
to have those moments.
Community meals per se.
One of the things that I find really interesting, and I'm taking another step back, is that when I go in the grocery store, the only cow that I see advertised is Angus. Right? Like, that's the only one, but there's several cows out there, and I know for a fact, I don't know for a fact, but I would guess that every piece of meat in the store ain't Angus.
No. And depending on what store you're going in, definitely not. So in talking about the different varieties of breeds that may be in a store can literally be unendable. And everybody, for some reason, yes, they
think they're getting Black Angus.
They center on Black Angus. And Black Angus is good, yes, but it's, to me, no different than any other beef type animal. They are all very similar. But the problem you're getting with, okay, say Walmart, Shopko isn't even anymore, but your different big stores, Costco, you're getting, I would say, well, the majority of the meat that is in America is Holstein. And so you're getting, in these big stores, you're getting old cows that have been used up as far as milk. They go to butcher. That's what you're getting in most of the major stores. You're getting old milk cows. And they use different things to tenderize meat so that you don't know that you're getting old cow. And they jacquard them. They use tenderizer, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so you're not realizing,
that you're
getting an old cow and you're paying Angus price. And that's what they like because that's where they make their money.
It's the market, yeah.
You're right. But you're not getting the top quality that you're thinking you're getting.
And I believe they can market Angus somehow, even if it's not, if it had some kind of genetics in it that come from
Well,
Angus.
you're not supposed to.
Yeah. Wow.
You're not supposed to, but if it says certified Angus on it, then it's got to come from an Angus, that breed. And so, and there's, totally different flavors and taste and color, like, let's say Jersey milk cows.
And that's what we have.
Jerseys, that meat is the reddest meat you will ever see.
Yeah.
And that's that breed.
Yeah.
And, totally different flavor than Holstein.
Yeah.
Holstein is, to me, probably your blandest because it's just the way it is.
So, we're going to wrap this up, but we got a couple more questions I want to ask. Speak to this, the art of butchering and how it can really benefit a family.
The art of butchering is so that you can butcher an animal, cut, wrap it, provide for your family so that you're not having to go out and just buy expensive meat.
Right.
That somebody else did all the work, did everything about it, and they're just charging you whatever.
Right.
This way, you get to start at the beginning of the process and see it all the way through and get to see the benefits of it, of what your hands did.
Right. I think even to that point, even for some families that don't want to go that route, the art of butchering is beneficial still in ways where now you can go in the store and you can buy a larger thing of meat and you can break that down yourself.
Right. You can grind your own hamburger and all that, yes. Because you can buy brisket. Brisket is a cheap cut of meat and they sell it in large quantity ours. But that whole thing could be ground into hamburger if you wanted. And you just made your hamburger costs cheaper.
All right. So there's a lot of benefits in
knowing your different cuts of meat.
Yeah, that too. So January 14th, we will be holding a butchering class and we'll hold more after that. But I guarantee you, if you miss out, you'll be missing out on saving a lot of money for you and your family. But not only that, I want to speak 1 second to everybody out there that's looking for an occupation. Right now, the industry of butchering is backed up years. Yeah. I mean, if you know anything about farming, if you try to get a butcher date, you're looking at maybe 2, even 3 years out. It is a fast growing industry that is really beneficial, lucrative.
Right.
It takes time, man hours, but if you're out there and you're looking for an occupation and you're looking for something new, butchering might be something that you want to get into. You want to speak to them about the income of taking that on as an occupation, or how lucrative it can be for someone that's just maybe looking for something new.
It can be very, very lucrative as far as if you want to go to work for a butcher shop, you can apprentice under a butcher there, or you can go get schooling, either one. Schooling is going to take you a couple of years, and there's a lot of times butcher shops and even the government per se will pay for your schooling to get you into that. so that, that can be your career.
Yeah.
And, and then you get to, do something you might like for life. And so,
but then there's a lot of waste parts that people don't want. If you had a little store, you can sell those too.
Right.
If you were certified,
yes. Yeah, you can do all kinds of things, with all of that, all the different areas, and knowing what we're knowing and being taught a little bit of that. There's so many benefits to the whole process.
Right. So butchering has been backed up for about 2 or 3 years. And what I've noticed that was due to COVID. And when you hear all of this stuff like chicken shortages and beef shortages, I have a funny story. I went to order some chicken because I was hungry and I was going to go to the feed store, which was in the same parking lot.
Right.
I go in. I told them I wanted some chicken. It's a family-owned restaurant, and they said we don't have any chicken. It's a chicken shortage. Okay. I went across the street and I ordered 100 meat birds. It wasn't even across the street. It was the same parking lot. I went in the same parking lot and ordered 100 meat birds.
Right.
So I start to question, how is there a chicken shortage when I just ordered this many birds, to feed my family and other people? But COVID-19 had a huge effect, and butchering was already an occupation that was kind of
fizzling out.
Right, fizzling out. So now we see COVID-19 come in, and we see the demand of a job like this for people.
Right.
Can you speak to that? Because we hear this chicken shortage and beef shortages. Could you speak to what actually the real issue is?
The real issue is, because of COVID-19, there has been a work shortage in all areas, in the butchers, in the delivery, in the, everything from one end to the other, so that, you can't get your product out there because there's no semi-drivers to get it there. The butchers, it's just like, it's weird because COVID-19 seemed to cause all these people that really weren't at retirement age yet to all just retire and get out of all the different areas of work. And so now there's massive shortages in butchers. You can't find them anywhere.
So with that being said, what we're talking about today, it is a lot simpler because of the lack of workers. It's simpler for you to go to a farm that you trust, maybe you find on the internet, and buy a small calf, because the demand for that owner to have that cow butchered or have that cow hauled off, it's basically almost impossible.
Right.
So they're willing to sell you an animal for a much cheaper price.
Right.
Which can be very, very beneficial. But there's no shortage. There's just a shortage of workers. So if you're looking for an occupation, you're looking for something to do, please come out to this butchering class January 14th. Be a part of it. You'll see my dear friend here, Alredo, there teaching us the ins and outs of butchering and how you could help provide better for your family in the area and the art of butchering. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beulah Family Homestead, and we'll see you next time.